First Contact's price. The Vald warship hung in space like a jagged obsidian knife, its hull breached and venting atmosphere. Commander Sarah Chen watched from the bridge of the UES Mercy as her tactical team reported the enemy vessel's failing life support systems. The aliens had fought viciously, but their ship was no match for humanity's superior shield technology. "They're dead in the water, Commander," Lieutenant Park reported, his fingers dancing across the tactical display. "Their weapons are offline, and they've got maybe 20 minutes of breathable atmosphere left." Sarah nodded, her decision already made. "Prepare rescue teams. We're bringing them aboard." The bridge fell silent. It was first contact protocol to render aid to damaged vessels, but the Vald had opened fire without provocation. They'd ignored all attempts at communication, responding only with plasma torpedoes and rail gunfire. "Ma'am," her XO, Commander Richards, stepped closer and lowered his voice. "These aliens tried to kill us. Protocol or not, maybe we should." "We're not them, John." Sarah cut him off. "Prep the medical bay and get security teams ready. We're doing this by the book." The rescue operation went smoothly. Too smoothly. The Vald offered no resistance as human teams boarded their vessel and evacuated their wounded. Their captain, a towering figure with iridescent scales and 4 arms, watched in silence as human medics treated his crew. It wasn't until hours later, when Sarah received the transmission from Earth Command, that she understood their mistake. The Vald had declared war on humanity, citing grievous insult to their honor as their casus belli. Sarah sat in her quarters that night, reviewing the footage from the rescue operation. Something about the Vald captain's expression had been bothering her. He hadn't looked defeated or grateful. He'd looked disgusted. "Computer, play Ambassador Morris' report again," she commanded. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the harried face of humanity's chief xenodiplomat. "The Vald operate on a completely different moral framework," Morris explained, his voice tight with concern. "In their culture, showing mercy to a defeated opponent is considered the ultimate form of contempt. By saving their crew, we effectively told them they were too pathetic to die honorably." Sarah felt her stomach twist. Humanity's first instinct to help had been interpreted as the gravest insult possible. Now, reports were coming in from across the border systems. Vald warships were mobilizing in massive numbers. "They're going to make us prove we're worthy of killing them," she muttered, understanding dawning with horrible clarity. The next few days proved her right. The Vald launched simultaneous attacks on 3 human colony worlds. Their tactics were brutal and efficient, but they took no prisoners and offered no quarter. Each defeated human vessel was destroyed completely, its crew given the honor of a warrior's death. Sarah's ship, the UES Mercy, was reassigned to the defense of New Mars, the largest human settlement in the Outer Rim. As they dropped out of FTL near the Red Planet's orbit, her tactical officer reported multiple Vald signatures approaching. "They're targeting civilian installations first," Lieutenant Park announced, his voice hard. 3 transport ships just went down in the Valles Marineris colony. "No rescue attempts?" Sarah asked, already knowing the answer. "No, Commander. They're making sure everyone dies." Sarah gripped the arms of her command chair, her knuckles white. The Vald were teaching humanity a lesson about mercy, and the price was being paid in innocent lives. But as she watched their ships move with mathematical precision, a thought began to form. "They're predictable," she said slowly. "Look at their attack patterns. They're following their honor code to the letter. Every move is designed to prove their strength." Commander Richards looked up from his station. "You have something in mind?" "Maybe," Sarah replied, her mind racing. "If they view mercy as weakness, then they'll never expect us to use it as a weapon. Park, get me a secure line to Fleet Command. I think it's time humanity learned to fight dirty." The battle for New Mars would become the first test of humanity's new strategy. And as Sarah Chen gave the order to engage, She knew that the galaxy was about to learn a harsh lesson about underestimating human adaptability. The Vault were about to discover that mercy wasn't humanity's weakness, it was their secret weapon. And by the time they realized their mistake, it would be far too late. The learning curve. Marcus Walsh had never considered himself a student of psychology. As the tactical officer aboard the UES Defiant, his expertise lay in weapons systems and battle strategies. But 6 months into the war with the Vault, he found himself becoming an expert in alien psychology out of sheer necessity. "They're doing it again," he announced, watching the holographic display as the Vault fleet moved into their standard attack formation. Third wave moving to protect their command ship's flanks. They never learn. Captain Reynolds, a veteran of the New Mars campaign, smiled grimly. Why should they? In their minds, changing tactics would admit their current approach is flawed. And that would be dishonorable. The bridge crew finished in unison. The war had evolved in ways no one had predicted. After the disaster of first contact, humanity had quickly realized that conventional military doctrine was useless against an enemy who interpreted every standard practice through their own twisted lens of honor. Marcus watched as the massive Vault vessels moved with deadly grace through space. Their ships were beautiful in a lethal way, all sharp angles and gleaming black surfaces, but their beauty came with a price. Their rigid adherence to their combat doctrine made them predictable. "Launch the Mercy protocols," Captain Reynolds ordered, her voice steady. The crew had started calling them that, Mercy protocols, with a mix of irony and pride. The strategy was elegantly simple: appear to offer aid or surrender, knowing the Vault would be compelled to refuse it. Each time they did, it opened up tactical opportunities that their honor-bound minds couldn't anticipate. Broadcasting distress signals from decoy ships, Marcus reported, his fingers dancing across his console. Targeting solutions ready for when they moved to destroy them. The Vault responded exactly as expected. Their fleet divided, breaking formation to ensure each helpless human vessel received an honorable warrior's death. In doing so, they created gaps in their defense that would have been unthinkable in their standard doctrine. "They're so focused on proving their strength," Marcus muttered. "They can't see we're using it against them." The battle unfolded like a deadly chess match. Each Vault move was countered before they made it, their strategies undermined by their own inflexible code of honor. When the last enemy ship retreated, leaving behind the wreckage of their proudest vessels, Marcus felt no triumph, only a deep understanding of how dangerous empathy could be when wielded as a weapon. Captain Reynolds stood at the viewport, watching the debris field slowly rotate in space. "Send out the actual rescue ships now," she ordered. "Let's show them what real mercy looks like." "Mom?" Marcus questioned, surprised. "They're already gone." "Exactly," Reynolds replied. "We'll recover their survivors, treat their wounded, and return them to the nearest Vault outpost. And each one of them will have to live with the shame of being saved by those they consider weak." It was psychological warfare on a scale humanity had never attempted before. Each act of mercy was a precision strike at the foundation of Vault society. Each survivor returned became a living testament to the contradiction in their beliefs. Back in his quarters that night, Marcus reviewed the battle footage. The Vault ship's movements reminded him of ancient samurai he'd studied in history classes, warriors so bound by their code of honor that they became blind to its limitations. "Computer," he called out, "access historical records of psychological warfare tactics. I want to know everything about how rigid belief systems can be turned against themselves." As he studied through the night, Marcus began to see patterns emerging. The Vault weren't just fighting a war. They were fighting to preserve their entire worldview, and that made them vulnerable in ways their superior technology couldn't protect against. Humanity had always been adaptable, able to learn and change in ways that made them survivors. Now they were learning to turn that adaptability into a weapon sharper than any the Vault possessed. The real question was, what would happen when the Vault finally realized they were being beaten not by superior firepower, but by the very mercy they despised. Understanding the enemy. Dr. James Rodriguez stood before the containment field, studying the captured vault commander with a mixture of fascination and concern. The alien was impressive, nearly 8 feet tall, with scales that shifted color with its moods, and all 4 arms held in a pose of rigid dignity despite its imprisonment. "You continue to dishonor us," the vault stated, its translator rendering the words in flat, emotionless English. "End my life or release me to fight. This observation is beneath us both." James leaned forward, careful to maintain eye contact, a sign of respect in vault culture, as they had learned. "Commander Kexar, I believe we've fundamentally misunderstood each other from the start. Help me understand why saving lives is seen as an insult among your people." The vault's scales flickered with bands of deep purple, a sign of agitation they'd come to recognize. "You speak of saving lives as if it were a virtue. When you spare an enemy, you declare them unworthy of a warrior's death. You proclaim them too weak, too insignificant to die with honor. And if we had destroyed your damaged ships instead?" James asked, making notes on his tablet. "Then you would have acknowledged us as equals," Kexar replied, its tone carrying something almost like longing. "Worthy adversaries deserve a clean death, not the shame of survival through enemy charity." James felt pieces clicking into place. The Vault weren't simply warlike. Their entire society was built around a complex framework of worth and recognition. Every interaction was a test, every gesture a statement about relative status. "What if," James ventured carefully, "our mercy wasn't meant as an insult? What if it came from a different understanding of strength?" Kexar's scales shifted to a deep blue, a color they hadn't observed before. "Explain." "In human history, we learned that the strongest warriors were often those who could choose not to kill. That true power lies not in the ability to take life, but in the wisdom to know when to preserve it." The vault commander was silent for a long moment, its scales rippling with complex patterns. "You claim that sparing us was a display of superior strength. We claim that different species can have different definitions of honor," James replied, "and that perhaps both our peoples have something to learn from each other." The conversation continued for hours, each revelation leading to deeper insights. James learned of the Vault's Great Culling, a historical event where their species had nearly destroyed itself through endless honor duels. The current rigid code had emerged as a way to regulate violence, to give it structure and meaning. But it was when Kexar began asking questions about human culture that James felt the first real hope for understanding. The Vault commander seemed particularly fascinated by the human concept of earning mercy, the idea that showing restraint could be a sign of confidence rather than contempt. As James left the containment area that night, he transmitted his findings directly to Fleet Command. "The Vault aren't just fighting us," he reported. "They're fighting against the possibility that their entire worldview might be wrong. And that makes this war about more than just territory or resources. It's become a battle of ideologies." The response from Command was immediate. "How do we use this information?" James stared at the message for a long moment before replying. "We need to show them that their understanding of strength is incomplete, and we need to do it in a way that doesn't destroy their culture in the process. Because if we simply defeat them, we prove their philosophy right. We need to win in a way that makes them question everything they believe about power and mercy." The real challenge, James realized, would be convincing his own people to take that risk. In the middle of a war, suggesting a strategy based on cultural revolution rather than military might would be a hard sell. But as he reviewed his conversation with Kexar, he became convinced it was their best chance for lasting peace. The tables turned. Captain Diana Foster stood on the bridge of the UES Challenger, watching the holographic display with intense focus. The Vol fleet ahead of them was massive, nearly 30 ships arranged in their traditional attack formation. But for the first time since the war began, she felt something close to hope. "All ships reporting ready, Captain," her XO, Commander Torres, reported. Operation Understanding is go. Diana nodded, her expression serious. Send the message. All frequencies, all languages. The message they broadcast was simple, but it had been carefully crafted based on Dr. Rodriguez's insights into Vault psychology. We recognize your strength. We offer you a warrior's challenge. Meet us in single combat, ship to ship, to prove whose understanding of honor is superior. The response was immediate. The Vault fleet's formation shifted, their largest battleship moving forward while the others held position. It was exactly as they'd predicted. The Vault couldn't refuse a direct challenge without losing face. They're taking the bait, Torres whispered. It's not bait, Diana corrected. It's a genuine offer. That's why it will work. The battle that followed would later be called the Turn of the Tide. The Challenger and the Vault battleship engaged in a desperate duel, their weapons lighting up the void. But unlike previous encounters, Diana fought with a new strategy, one that demonstrated both power and restraint. The Challenger's weapons struck with surgical precision, disabling but not destroying key systems. Each shot was accompanied by a message. We acknowledge your valor. We choose to spare you not out of contempt, but out of respect for your warrior spirit. The Vault commander's response crackled through the comm. You mock us with your restraint. No, Diana replied calmly. We honor you by fighting at our full potential. True strength lies in having the power to destroy and choosing not to use it. The battle raged for hours, a deadly dance of technology and tactics. The Vault ship fought with incredible skill, but Diana's strategy was wearing them down both physically and psychologically. Every disabled system, every careful shot that could have been lethal but wasn't, forced them to confront the contradiction in their beliefs. Finally, with their weapons disabled and life support failing, the Vault commander made contact again. Why do you not finish us? Because, Diana answered, a true warrior knows that the hardest battle is not against an enemy, but against one's own limitations. We offer you the chance to evolve beyond them. There was a long silence. Then, remarkably, the Vault commander responded. We would discuss terms. The rest of the Vault fleet held position, watching as the Challenger's rescue teams helped repair their flagship's critical systems. It was a scene that would have been unthinkable months ago. Humans and Vault working together, each learning from the other. As Diana watched the cooperation unfold, she received a priority message from Fleet Command. Reports were coming in from across the front. Other Vault fleet commanders were requesting similar duels, similar chances to test this new understanding of honor. They're not surrendering, Torres observed, but they're changing. That's better than surrender, Diana replied. They're choosing to evolve. And so are we. Redefining strength. The emergency signal came at the worst possible time. 3 months after the Battle of Understanding, as it was now being called, the peace talks were still fragile. When the distress beacon started broadcasting from the Vault colony world of Kexteran, both species faced a critical test. Commander Sarah Chen, now Admiral Chen, stood before the combined Human-Vault Emergency Council. The stellar core is destabilizing, she reported. We have less than 48 hours before it goes nova. There are 3 million Vault colonists on that world. The Vault High Commander, Kexar, the same commander who had once been their prisoner, spoke with characteristic directness. Our ships are too far to reach them in time. A warrior's death awaits them. No, Sarah replied firmly. The UEA's mercy is in range. We can evacuate them. The chamber erupted in discussion. The Vault representative scales flickered with complex emotions as they debated. To accept human help would traditionally be a mark of shame, but to refuse it would doom millions. Dr. Rodriguez, who had become the key interpreter of Human-Vault relations, stepped forward. High Commander, remember what we learned. Sometimes, the greatest strength is in accepting help, not refusing it. Kexar's scales shifted through several colors before settling on a new pattern, one that human xenobiologists had never seen before. You would save our people, even though we are technically still at war. Especially because we are at war, Sarah answered. Let us show you what real strength looks like. The evacuation operation was the largest humanitarian mission in human history. The UES Mercy, along with every available human ship in range, worked tirelessly alongside the few Vault vessels that could reach the system in time. As the star began its final collapse, humans and Vault worked side by side, racing against time to save as many lives as possible. The rigid hierarchies and honor codes that had defined Vault society began to flex and adapt as necessity demanded new ways of thinking. In the final hours, as the last shuttles lifted off from the doomed planet's surface, something remarkable happened. The Vault ship lost power during the escape, stranded in the path of the coming nova. Without hesitation, a human vessel moved to assist. And this time, the Vault accepted the help without shame. From the bridge of the Mercy, Sarah watched as the combined fleet jumped to safety moments before the star exploded. The rescued colonists were safe, but more importantly, something fundamental had changed in how both species viewed each other. In the aftermath, as the refugees were settled and the crisis passed, Kexar requested a formal meeting with the human leadership. The Vault commander's scales now displayed a pattern that would become famous throughout both civilizations, a symbol of transformation. We have learned, Kexar announced, that true strength takes many forms. The ability to destroy is one kind of power, but the willingness to save, to help, to show mercy, this is a power we had forgotten. You have reminded us of what we once knew, before the great culling nearly destroyed us. The peace treaty that followed wasn't just an end to hostilities. It was a beginning of a new understanding between two very different species. The Vault began to integrate concepts of mercy and flexibility into their honor code, while humans learned valuable lessons about the importance of principle and conviction. Years later, when asked about the war, Sarah Chen would often say that the real victory wasn't in defeating the Vault. It was in helping them defeat their own limitations. And in doing so, humanity had overcome some of their own. The galaxy would remember this as the war where mercy proved stronger than might, where understanding conquered fear, and where two species learned that true strength lies not in the ability to take life, but in the wisdom to preserve it. As new challenges arose and other species entered the galactic stage, both humans and Vault stood together, ready to face whatever came next. They had learned that the greatest victories come not from destroying your enemies, but from transforming them into allies. And in the end, that was the most powerful lesson of all. The end.